but you can see Mike moving inside the car.
Mike Conway.
Oh, the airborne ones are so bad. Oh my God, oh my God. See, some of the most dangerous parts here are when the car that is airborne and its wheels make contact with the other driver from their head, which is unprotected. And I know in Formula One, they started creating some sort of protection for them. I don't know if this was instituted at the time of this race.
Here in turn 3 and 4,
No, it wasn't.
quite a few years ago.
Wow.
And the car is up into the fence, which is
Wow,
almost
wow,
reminiscent of...
No, so yeah, the Halo was brought in for 2018 in Formula One, and they also instituted an aero screen device at roughly the same time at IndyCar. The dangerous thing in this accident is, like Dr. Mike said, you know, he could have landed on top of this other driver. I'm glad he didn't. I can't quite remember who the other driver was in this situation. I have a feeling it was like Oriol Servia or someone like that, maybe. Anyway, also another thing to consider is that Mike Conway there had a very similar incident to Robert Wickens, like getting into the catch fencing and spinning around. Very reminiscent of Robert Wickens. In this scenario, the car reacted a little better. I feel like he probably wasn't going quite as fast, and he probably hit it at a slightly better angle as well, and yeah, was able to walk away from this one if I remember correctly. Also, these little bits of carbon fiber and little bits of shrapnel as well. The safety fencing did an awesome job to stop it from going into the crowd. Because you might notice with the Robert Wickens accident, there wasn't actually a crowd behind that, or a grandstand or whatever. In this case, there are fans kind of lining this whole area, and the catch fencing would have saved a lot of their skins in that.
Kenny Brack's accident at Texas quite a few years.
But mentioning Kenny Brack, Kenny Brack he is an IndyCar driver who raced in the early 2000s, you know, late 1990s. And the reason I'm mentioning him is because I know him. I met him. I went to school with his daughter. His daughter went to my primary school. And yeah, Kenny Brack holds the record for surviving the highest G-force accident ever recorded. His sensors registered 214 times the force of gravity when he had his accident at Texas Motor Speedway in 2001, and yeah, crazy how he survived that. Scientifically, that probably shouldn't be possible. You know, the body is a very resilient thing.
Years ago, guys, very, very lucky.
Yeah, so he went body into the fence, which again takes a major toll on your spinal cord, because imagine you're sitting and your spinal cord experiences all those compressive forces, puts pressure on your discs. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a disc herniation involved here, bulging disc, maybe even a disc rupture from the severity of that injury. Conway had surgery for multiple fractures in his lower left leg and had been diagnosed with a compression fracture in his back. That's interesting because I was talking about disc compression, but the vertebrae, which are the actual bony bodies in between the discs, can fracture as well. Must have been a lot of damage to his spine, but...
He's lucky he went in kind of with the bottom of the car first as well, because a year after this, Dan Weldon had a similar accident at Las Vegas where he went into the catch fencing, but he went in cockpit first, and unfortunately Dan Weldon passed away in that accident. So Mike Conway here, like I said, very, very lucky.
Whoa! Oh, look out! We got trouble. This is going to hurt.
Oh my God! For the people in the stands.
Good eye.
And for the car. Oh my God.
Watch this, he gets hit again.
Oh my God, multiple hits. The whole race is over.
So
yep.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, good eye, Dr. Mike. Noticing that the fans would have been in severe trouble in that one. Actually, let me rewind that. Again, we're talking about the catch fencing here doing its job. At speedways like this, the catch fencing is so important, way more important than a Formula One race or whatever, because the cars are going so fast and they are right next to the grandstands. Watch just how much debris comes off Jeff Bodine's car here. Watch how many sparks and flames are coming off it, and just think about what this accident would have been like if the catch fencing had just been a little bit more flimsy. Nasty freaking stuff. Nasty. Absolutely. And then he gets hit again. Watch. Bang. And he is so lucky on that second hit that it wasn't a very square hit. But you can also see that the safety cell did its job. Like the back of the car kind of broke away, much like it did in Romain Grosjean's accident, and the actual safety cell, the compartment where the driver sits, remained perfectly intact. All of the roll hoop was intact, and so were the shock absorbers and all of that. Yeah, the actual mechanical design of the car did its job so well in this one.
Conscious and able to move.
Oh
I don't know
my
about you
God.
guys, but I'm breathing a little bit better right now.
Me too.
I mean, I'm not, because you're still not out of danger until you're in the hospital. Even in the hospital, when we have a patient in one area and we need to transfer them, whether it's from a regular inpatient floor unit to the ICU or from the ER to the patient room, that transportation can only happen when the patient's stable, and things go wrong during that transportation that you need to be present and ready to activate a code blue, a rapid response, and treat the patient right then and there. He suffered a concussion, facial laceration, multiple bruises, right wrist fracture, and a small fracture to a vertebrae, and is in intensive care unit and serious but stable.
What Dr. Mike was talking about just then as well, with the whole kind of, it's not over, you know, the driver's not out of the blue until he's been checked over in hospital and it's all, you know, all cleared and all of that, is very true. It reminds me of Mark Donoghue in 1975 had an accident in Formula One, and he seemed like he was making a full recovery at first. He only died about a day later, when he had like a brain injury, and it only started showing symptoms kind of a day later, and then he died. And yeah, it looked as if he was making a full recovery. So this is why, even with seemingly small accidents, you have to take the driver to hospital, and you have to, you know, get those scans, look for concussions, get the medical professionals to absolutely 100% make sure the driver is okay.
I would say that it's probably a very severe concussion when you're being tossed around at that rate of speed. I mean, that's incredible.
Just as I walk out in the infirmary,
Richard Petty, the
they
king.
said Lee Petty just went over turn 3 and 4 wall.
Oh.
Yikes.
This looks like...
And that's what happens when you don't have the safety fencing. I mean, it's like I said, you know, the safety fencing is a last resort, but it needs to be there because otherwise, you know, cars can fly straight over. Also, this guardrail is so flimsy. I don't know how drivers did it in the 60s. Like, if you go into that guardrail there, it's just going to fold. It's not even a proper Armco barrier. It's not one that can flex and then flick you back out. It just folds. Like you just saw. That there was Richard Petty talking about his father, Lee Petty. Lee was one of the very early NASCAR pioneers, and yeah, he had a good few accidents that he survived. I mean, Richard himself had a good few accidents that he, you know, somehow walked away from. But yeah, this one is just crazy because you look at it and you're like, wow. Did they not think this could happen? Is it not something that they even considered? I guess it's probably that they just assumed that racing was always going to be dangerous. They didn't know that there was anything they could do about it. And in a way, they're right, but you've got to contain the cars at least.
Lee Petty's car was destroyed, and then they took his broken, apparently lifeless body to the hospital. It was some time before he could have broken bones fixed. They waited to see if he would stabilize as he lay in a coma.
I wonder, when they say apparently lifeless here, I wonder if they say that because, like, he was initially diagnosed as dead and then they realized, oh, he's actually alive. Because that happened surprisingly often back in those days. There's a story about, who was it, Alonso Jr., potentially? Could have been, yeah, I think it was Alonso Jr. He had a NASCAR accident at Riverside, which was also in the 60s, may have been like 68 or something. And he was initially diagnosed as dead. You know, the nurse who responded to the scene or whatever was like, yep, this guy's a goner. And then there was another driver on the scene who stopped to help. And he heard this guy breathing, and he was like, no, he's not dead, take him to hospital. And they did, and they brought him back to life, and this guy went on to become a multiple time champion. And yeah, he was given up for dead, and it happened again as well. I mean, I heard about a Formula 4 driver who had a similar thing happen, and there was a it does happen sometimes.
Oh, throwback. Okay, let's see what happened. Oh.
Wow.
Okay, those are the ones I'm talking about, where you're going high rate of speed.
High rate of speed to a sudden stop, yes indeed. Now, let me see if I can explain just why this one was so bad, because this is actually quite a low speed accident. This is at Bristol Motor Speedway. Now, do you see that gate there? The trouble with the low speed, slow, kind of like small ovals. I think Bristol is like half a mile oval, maybe a little bit longer, 3/4 of a mile, something like that. Is that because it's not a speedway, there's no real room to put in like a bridge or an underpass in, but you have to get the cars to the middle somehow, because that's where the pit lane is. So they bring the cars through that gate before every race meeting, and you know, take them down the track and into the middle. And in this case, he's hit the gate during a race, and it's kind of moved out of the way, leaving the end of the solid concrete wall completely unprotected. That's a risk that still kind of persists to this day, but nowadays we've got a lot better at like there's a safer barrier that kind of deflects the cars away before they can hit the gate and all of that. And yeah, basically we've got a lot better at stopping the cars from hitting the solid concrete wall left unprotected by the gate. But back in those days, you know, it happened like this sometimes, where the driver would literally just come to an instant stop, and the car in this case was absolutely destroyed. This is one of the most torn up I have ever seen a race car end up. That grammar didn't sound right. One of the most torn up states I've ever seen a car end up in. Oh, I'm on mute still.
That's where you lose your life.
There's Michael Waltrip now, standing up, climbing out from around that shredded, mangled mass.
You can't even tell what way up the car is.
Pontiac Grand Prix
Yeah.
just a few moments ago.
Yeah, Ben, I think I'm all right. Got some contusions and a little bit of confusion, but that's probably not too unusual.
That's not unusual. That is unusual. When we decide whether or not to scan someone's head for an intracranial bleed, it's based off of certain signs and symptoms, but also the mechanism of injury. And going 100 miles an hour or whatever that was to zero is most definitely a high-speed accident warranting a full-body CAT scan.
Yeah, but they saw concussions very differently back in those days. I mean, you've had the whole thing recently where people have started to put so much more research into concussions in sports in general, like in boxing, WWE, and American football and all of that. And we've started to realize just how these concussions like add up over time and how dangerous they can be. Back in those days, it was just seen as something that happened. You know, yeah, I got a concussion, back to racing the next day, you know, why not? But it really does add up, as Dr. Mike's saying, and it's, you know, he's probably going to get quite annoyed at this clip just because it happened back in the 90s and they saw it so differently.
I'm all right, and we'll go home and get a good night's rest tonight.
No,
Look at that! That's the front of the car there. It's connected by a chain. That's it. Like, it's just a chain. And the steering wheel's unprotected and the seat's somewhere else. The car was absolutely ripped apart. I mean, nowadays the cars are so much better put together than that, but like, whoa. And like I said before, as far as racing accidents go, that's quite a low speed one. That's the lowest speed accident we've seen so far on this video. And the car's just completely torn apart because the angle he hit the wall at. Yeah, I mean, the human body is very resilient, and I mean, obviously his helmet did its job and all of that, but I mean, he wouldn't have even been wearing a hands device, would he? Because that wasn't mandated until like 2003 in NASCAR. So, whew, nasty one.
Don't go home, you go straight to the hospital. I hope you went to the hospital.
You know, my seat stayed secured.
Nowadays, sorry to just pause it immediately again, but nowadays, there's a rule in NASCAR that if a car crashes out on track and they can't get back to the pit lane under their own power, they have to go to the hospital. Even if they could walk back, like even if they feel absolutely fine and, you know, the car is just like, you know, hit the wall and broken down or something, they have to go to the hospital. The only way they can get out of it is if they can drive the car back to the pits. Obviously, it doesn't take into account the fact that some accidents where the car can get back to the pits are probably still going to be bigger than some accidents where the car can't. But, you know, it's a good step towards looking after the drivers properly.
In the frame rail, in the only frame rail really that stayed as a part of the back of the car. This part went back.
I think the only thing that really saved him here was that he hit the outside of his car, not his own side. If it was the driver's side that had that impact, it would have been a very different outcome.
And that's why in the United States, all NASCAR ovals go anti-clockwise, whereas in Europe, all ovals go clockwise. Yes. It's because if you have an accident like that, the actual driver's side isn't the one that impacts the wall. What we're about to see here, do you remember So when Dr. Mike saw the Lee Petty accident earlier, and he was talking about the rib kind of breaking and puncturing the driver's lung, and that being called like a, I can't remember what it's called now, like a pneumothorax, I think. Pneumothorax, am I right there? I think so. That's what Fernando ended up with in this situation. And even though what you're about to see is Fernando having a huge crash and then walking away from it, he did then have to miss the next race. Only one race though. He was back again 2 races later after this.
Alonso, let's go. This is McLaren days.
Yes.
Ferrari days. Oh! There goes his front tire. Oh, it's so hard to make out what just happened.
Is he okay?
The whole axle looked like it went. He walked away like that?
He did.
That's him?
Yeah.
Wait, is that Esteban Gutierrez?
Yes.
That's my friend. Look at all these pictures of me and him.
You see the sky,
Whoa.
you see the ground.
Dr. Mike knows Esteban Gutierrez. That's freaking awesome. Awesome how he knows that this was Alonso in his McLaren days as well. Just to see someone who actually has like a vague interest in my quite niche sport is like, ooh, that's cool. That's nice. But yeah, Fernando here. He was unlucky with the way the car rolled over. Cars don't normally roll over like that. The gravel trap kind of gripped him, and also the car was quite unstable because it had both of the front wheels missing and all of that. And there's a constant argument in racing about gravel traps here. Gravel traps are supposed to slow cars down and bring them to a controlled stop, before they hit something solid or whatever. And that kind of plays into what Dr. Mike was saying earlier about how sudden stops are much worse than being flung around a little bit. And that's true. The trouble is that if a car goes into a gravel trap sideways like this, it does have a tendency to kind of like dig in, and then the car becomes top heavy and it just kind of tumbles over, and that can be worse. Trouble is, when a car goes into a gravel trap and rolls over, people are like, now that's why we have to get rid of gravel traps. And then when a car goes into a runoff area without gravel traps and doesn't roll over and it hits a wall smack bang instead, people are like, right, that's why we need gravel traps. And it's a bit of a no-win situation, because whatever happens, you're always going to have some kind of freak accident that leads people to think, do we have the right thing in play here? And that's a question that needs to be asked, but I mean, you can't really win in this situation.
And you see the sky, and you know exactly where you are, and you keep moving, you want to stop. Then the car stopped. I saw a little space to go out, and I said I go out quickly. My mom will watch TV, so I want to be out quite quickly. And I say that I'm okay.
I feel fine physically, but everything hurts a little because you move around so much at those speeds. The knees, what bothers me most is it hit the steering column, but I feel very lucky.
Yeah, that's
very
understandable.
lucky. Everything is gonna hurt for a while. And honestly, you should be under observation, because if you're even having a small bleed internally, you wanna make sure that you're able to act quickly.
Little does Dr. Mike know, that's exactly what happened. Alonso ended up being diagnosed, actually a few days later, I think, with I think I'm saying this right, a pneumothorax.
So I have a funny story with Esteban Gutierrez. We went to a family dinner. I took him on my Audi TTS, and I was gonna drop him off at his place and then go home. And I'm with a Formula One driver. I'm gonna drive and try and look cool. And because of that, I turned into the Holland Tunnel in the city, and I didn't mean to do that. So I was like, oh my God, I turned into the wrong thing. So I was like, let me just back up real quick, because I'm not that far in. And as soon as I started backing up, you see a cop walk out onto the street and go, excuse me, sir, come on, and had me pull up, checked my windows for tints, started writing me tickets. I was like, officer, I'm so sorry, I made this mistake. I'm a physician, this is a Formula One driver. He's like, I couldn't care less. Here's your tint ticket. But yeah, that goes to say that even if you have a Formula One driver in your passenger seat, don't try and show off, because things will go wrong.
It's so cool.
Oh no, this is gonna be the worst one, isn't it?
The worst one in terms of number of cars involved. Yeah, look at that.
This looks like a skit. The only thing that I'll say is this is pretty low speed, so I guess that's a little bit safer. But These vehicles weren't as safe, so that's not necessarily true. You know
Look
what's
how many
really
roll over.
scary? When you watch some of those videos when there is a blizzard and there's low visibility, and then there's an accident and another
yeah.
accident, and all of a sudden there's cars.
Actually, I want to highlight a couple of things in this. First of all, let's count how many cars roll over, because back in those days there was no like electronic stability control, and it's like when I drive my Mini. I don't have a Mini in real life, but like when I do sim racing in my Mini, I have to be so careful not to hit curbs too hard or whatever, because the car does literally just roll over. Another thing to watch out for is like, do you notice the drivers getting out of their cars and running away before the accident has come to a complete stop? That's friggin' crazy. Like, I mean, nowadays you're told to stay there and just wait until the safety crews have arrived, because otherwise, you know, you could literally just make it worse by getting out and running into the path of an oncoming car. But yeah. Aplon says electronic stability control. That's a new term for me. Yeah, you may also hear it abbreviated to ESC. If you drive a car, your car will absolutely have it, providing it was made after like the 1970s or whatever. It does what it says on the tin. It makes the car more stable. Back in the olden days, if you hit a curb too hard or you turn too fast or whatever and you had a top heavy car, you could just roll over, especially if you were racing. Nowadays it takes a lot more force to actually cause a car to go upside down. Right, let's count how many cars go upside down here. Okay, so they're going to come into view. There's one, there's two. Is there a third one? Yep, third one just at the edge of the picture. Fourth, and I think a fifth comes in soon. Here we go. There we go, fifth up on the banking. Is there a sixth? Oh, a few more piling in. There's drivers getting out of the car. There's drivers getting out and just running across the track. And the accident hasn't even come to a stop yet. There's still cars piling in. 5 cars flipping over. To do that today in a NASCAR race would be unthinkable.
Accident and another accident, and all of a sudden there's cars just sliding into other cars, and then people come out to see what's going on and they're getting trapped. Never exit your vehicle if you're in one of those situations. Call for help, stay in your vehicle, because you don't know what's coming behind you. That's the scary part.
What I'm saying,
and if you do exit, run away. Like, don't stay on the highway. I mentioned earlier that I flew an F-16. Check out that video.
Okay, well that's that for Dr. Mike. That was really fun, actually. It took me a long time because I had so much to say about this one, but yeah, that was an awesome video, and it's so cool to know that Dr. Mike actually does know quite a bit about racing. I mean, he's friends with Esteban Gutierrez. He recognized that Alonso was racing a McLaren. Yeah, no, very cool, Dr. Mike. Thank you for the video. So that was that. I'm probably going to film another like outro for. I think I'm probably going to edit that into a YouTube video and upload that to my channel in due time. But yeah, if you have been watching the YouTube video, thank you very much for watching. This is being streamed live on Twitch as well, and if you want to follow along when I do things like this on Twitch, then the link will be in the description for that. So make sure you follow that link and join me for next time. Thank you very much.